Welcome to OK Miniatures. A few months back I found a cool model on Thingiverse of an articulated AT-AT walker, which is a little bit of a mouthful to say, so I will henceforth call it the Zero Walker. Or I'll just come up with some creative ways to not say AT-AT. Ever since I found this model, I've wanted to turn it into an abandoned wreck, kind of like this picture. I've actually really liked this picture because I feel like you could hang this on your wall and be a geek, but it's not overbearingly so. I printed the pieces in 2 prints with 2 very full print beds. I didn't want to spend too much time on the setup beyond fitting all the pieces on, so unsurprisingly a few failed. But that should be okay since it's intended to be broken. As long as nothing visually critical is missing, I can work around any failed prints. After running inventory, I was a little disappointed to find that one of the femurs was missing. I would have rather had the leg broken off halfway down so the 4th leg would still be visible from the front, but instead I'll just have the foot and shin chilling somewhere on the ground. Then it was on to assembling this model. I'd like to point out that this model was intended for filament printers, and while the tolerancing is a bit tight with these resin prints, the bigger problem was that the resin was too brittle for the clipping features to snap in place and not just snap off. I ended up breaking a lot of the clips while assembling, and the rest I cut off because they were too tight to fit at all or would probably break something else more important. I did assemble one of the legs, and it was positional, so that was cool. But now I sort of want a filament printer so I can see this guy fully articulated. But for this project, I just glued the pieces in place with super glue. As the assembly was wrapping up, I noticed a few pieces wouldn't fit together, which is when I finally realized that these pieces had been made pre-supported for a filament printer, so a number of the joints were completely filled in. At this point, not the end of the world, I just clipped away some pieces to make things gluable. Even with the clips intact, there was going to be some gaps in the model's armor, but with many of the clips broken off and a few pieces missing, there were some chasms that needed to be filled. I broke out the old milliput and started filling. When a section looked pretty good, I used a little bit of water to prevent sticking so I could really smooth it out. I had a fair bit of milliput left over, which I'd rather not waste, so I turned that into a few lumpy rocks using some tin foil to texture them. After letting everything dry overnight, it was time to start putting things together. I wanted to paint the model and base together, but before gluing the AT-AT on, I primed the bottom. This will make life simpler later because it'll be harder to reach once it's on the base. Of course, just because it's the bottom side doesn't mean I won't paint it more. All sides are equal, but some sides are more equal than others. I also primed the bottom of the base, because why not? For the ground, I mixed up a paste of black paint, casting powder, and white glue. I spread a thin film of this over the entire base and then placed all the different pieces in the mud. I covered the AT-AT's feet like it's been there a while and settled in a bit, maybe made some new friends. I also dabbed a little bit of mud on the legs to give it a more grimy texture. Put a stump in the mud to make it easier to attach a tree later, since there isn't any foam to just stab the trunk into, and the stump is actually intended as a base for the tree that I have, which is convenient. To give a little more variety of texture, I spread around a little white glue, sprinkled some tiny gravel on top. Then I took the diorama outside to finish priming. For the paint scheme, I wanted to have a little fun. I started out pretty normal, painting the walker gray with a heavy dry brushing, but then I gave it a turquoise dry brushing on one side and a lavender on the other. Since that didn't look too bad, I sort of jumped off the deep end with the base, giving the ground a smattering of several bright colors before bringing it all back together with a dry brush of tan. I really like the look, but if I could redo it, I'd give it a dark brown coat first so there isn't so much black showing through, then I'd be able to lean a little farther into the bright colors. The way I did it this time, I had to go a little bit heavier on the tan to give some distinction at the edges of the diorama, and to get rid of the gloss from the black paint, which is still peeking through in places. The black paint, though, did give the ground a cool, cracked look in certain places. After the ground was just about done, I pulled out a stiff brush and added little bits of moss and rust to the AT-AT, and a few bright sections of grass on the greener areas of the ground. Then I cleaned out the stump and glued the tree in place, and after gluing a few clumps of foliage in place, I called it good. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the future.